Hi, and welcome to the Tea with Intuitives podcast. I'm Melly, an Akashic reader, past life psychic, and channeling coach. And today I am welcoming special guest Rosie Chuong, who is a Somatic Healing Facilitator. As a complex trauma survivor and a daughter of Cambodian refugees, Rosie Chuong is no stranger to the intergenerational impacts of genocide, domestic violence, and forced displacement. Breathwork has been a life-changing modality helping Rosie not only to address trauma in her lineage, but also to regain safety in her body after experiencing multiple instances of sexual assault throughout her life. Today, Rosie is a somatic healing facilitator guiding curious communities to connect with their sense of flow and play. She facilitates breathwork journeys crafted in sensual, ceremonial, and intentional containers where the collective can work with the medicine of their breath and the intelligence of the body. You'll likely find her in the kitchen cooking up a fun meal or on the mountain snowboarding nonstop. Rosie is currently residing on what was originally known as the land of, and please forgive my pronunciation here, but the land of Nuagatupu, also called the Ute tribe, currently called Wheat Ridge, Colorado. You can find her on social media at Rosie Chuong, and I will also leave a link to her website in the show notes. Rosie, hi.
Hi, Melly.
Hey, thank you for coming on the Tea with Intuitives podcast.
I'm super excited for today's conversation.
Yeah, it's really fun because I was reading your bio prior to recording this when you shared this with me, and we realized that we have something in common. I mean, you're the daughter of Cambodian refugees. My husband is the son of Laotian refugees, so we have that in common. Also saw that you are Pisces, right?
Yes, I definitely have a lot of Pisces placements. Pisces Sun, Venusian Pisces. Those are like the two big. Oh, Mercury and Pisces. That was the other thing. Yeah, so I have
Wow.
quite a few
Okay.
placements there.
Okay. I'm a Pisces too. So like we have some kind of the same dreamy creative energy. That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rosie, I would like to begin by asking you, how did you come to do what you do? How did you come to work with breath work and flower essences and really focusing on healing as well?
Yeah, basically, it's been a process of curiosity and openness. Um, Long story short, I was basically in this point of my life in like my own spiritual crisis. Some people might call that their dark night of the soul. Just a few years ago, where I literally did not know what I was doing. And I felt like I had it all together. I felt like I knew where I was going. I felt like I had this North Star. And then suddenly I just felt like, what happened to my compass? I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And so it's been like this series of events within like that darker period where I lacked motivation. Physically, I was just going through it. Um, a chronic fatigue was a big thing, and I felt like that was a huge challenge for someone. So I think we can get into this later, but like ultimately, I've been put in very traumatic situations where I did not have any control of my body, and so being at the gym, fitness and exercise, physical activities was a place for me to gain control of my body, to like feel as if I had that control. So when I was going through this darker phase and I was experiencing this chronic fatigue, I didn't have the gym anymore. I could not get there physically. And that was like a huge awakening for me because I realized, oh, actually, I thought that I was somebody who had things under control, who like was in this process of like recovery and healing because I was able to um, project that energy that I had, the physical, the mental, and emotional energy towards like physical activity. When in reality, when that was taken away from me, it turned out that, like, well, actually, I don't necessarily have the appropriate tools or a healthy outlet for me to process the things that I needed to process. Actually, I was escaping by using those physical activities and the gym as a place of escape. So, yeah, that was definitely like a darker phase just a few years ago. And ultimately, it led me to do an esoteric healing session, an Akashic Records reading. And from there, one of the messages that stood out to me was that, like, like, you're really meant to heal in this lifetime. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but okay. And then just a few months later, I had a mediumship reading, and again, in that reading, the same message came through. You're meant to be a healer. And actually, like, what if you wanted your business or your vocation to be a healer? Like, that is an option for you. And by that point, I was like, I have nothing to lose. Like, I already don't know where I'm going with my career. I don't know, like, what the end goal is with, like, retiring and stuff like that. What if I just explored this other avenue? So from there, just a few months after I started to take esoteric healing courses, I was already doing breath work as a personal modality for myself, and I loved breath work. So it's been this process of kind of like exploring what it is that I wanted to do. I really thought that, like, energy healing was the thing that I was going to do. But in the process of that, I've also discovered flower essences, and that too has also been very healing for me. So really, getting to where I'm at right now has been this process of really just exploring, trying different modalities and seeing, like, what has worked for me in my journey, and seeing how I can share that practice with other people.
Yeah, and it's really a spiritual act because it's about, all healers, they're healing themselves and they're helping others heal themselves as well. Before we go any further, I forgot to talk about our beverages because it's tea with intuitives. So, Rosie, what are you drinking?
Okay, let me pull it up right now. I just have to mention it is 11:11 where I'm at right now. I just saw the time as I was picking this up. So this is a mocha. And, I actually stopped drinking coffee like a couple years ago. And part of the reason why is because I realized I was dependent on coffee. And so even that has been like a healing process, just realizing all these different ways in which we're dependent on all these, like, external things. And so definitely from, like, a health standpoint, things have been better for me in terms of, like, not depending on things like coffee. But today, because it's very special and we're here, I was like, I'm gonna get coffee.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. And I chose a specialty today in honor of you. So I have a Cambodian oolong that my mother bought in Cambodia. She went there about 6 months ago, and I'm drinking it in a chung. So I have no idea if Cambodians originally drank their teas in chungs, but I thought I meant it looks Asian, it fits.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that little cup that you have, oolong
Yeah.
tea. That's
Really
beautiful.
cute,
It's
really cute. Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question so you can take a sip of your coffee because I know you'll be the one doing a lot of talking and you won't get to drink as much as I will. So, yeah, I'd like to touch on breath work for people who've never done breath work. How does it help us, and how is the session going? Are we going to get out of breath and dizzy and all of that questions that people can have?
Yeah, so with breath work, oh man, there's just so many different ways to approach it. Ultimately, breath work is about this circular three-part breath. I'm sorry, Melly, like my throat.
It's
Stop
fine.
right
Me
there.
too, a little bit. We're recording this in November. There are throat issues here and there. It's going to happen.
So we're using what is called like a conscious connected breathing pattern. So this is a circular three-part breath in a particular breathwork journey. So we can, there's this range of how we can use breathing to connect with ourselves, connecting with the spirit and the medicine of the breath. So we can do something as simple as just like engaging with different breathing techniques. And that could be for like 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be anything that's super intense. And even using those different breathing techniques can be beneficial for us because it's really about regulating our nervous system. And there's a lot of research that is supportive of the practices of utilizing breathing techniques. So that is on the spectrum of lighter breathing guidance that we can incorporate into our ritual of everyday practice. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are breathwork journeys. And so with a breathwork journey, this is basically using that active 3-part circular breath for a sustained period of time. And usually a more appropriate journey should be at least 45 minutes. So really just thinking like you're doing the active 3-part breath for 45 minutes and more or more. And to be able to get into that rhythm of it, it's really assisting us and allowing us to tap into our bodies and really tap into our nervous system and helping with making these different types of internal shifts within us. So even within breathwork journeys, there are different styles and techniques of breathing, and it depends on the facilitator that you're working with, what they're trained in, and also it depends on you. What do you have the emotional capacity for? What do you have the somatic availability for? So if I'm working with someone, then I need to have an understanding of like, what is your health history? That's something that we definitely have to take into consideration because there are contraindications of breath work in of itself. And then from there, understanding what your availability and capacity is like, then thinking about like, well, how do we introduce this particular journey and how do we guide someone into that? So not necessarily that you're getting out of breath, but I would definitely say that if you if you can do 15 minutes on an elliptical, 15 minutes on a treadmill, a high intensity workout for an hour, you likely could do breath work as well.
It's funny. This is exactly what I was going to say about the capacity. I feel like it's like when I'm training, I'm working out. At some point, it's too much for me. So I work out with a nap, and at some point I need to take a break, and then 2-3 seconds, and I go on, I continue. And I feel that with breath work, at least for me, because I'm not like super active, I'm not much into sports or anything. So it's exactly how a session goes for me. Like I'm going to be into it. I'm taking a short breath. I'm letting the other people, do their thing. If they're able to do it for nonstop, like 30 minutes, that's fine, but it's just not me. And never got told not to do that or to just keep going to force it. You just go with the flow because it's breath work. And could you please explain to us what happened for you, or maybe you want to say what happens in general for people when they experience their first breathwork sessions?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, in someone's first breathwork session, the most immediate thing that's going to come to my mind is like, let's talk about the physical. So, more than likely, there will be tingling sensations, especially for a first-time breather. And I would also say that it's dependent on your seated position, whether you're laying up or even laying down. If you're standing up, I think like depending on those particular seated positions, how soon you'll start to feel those types of sensations can vary. I have experienced that when I'm laying down, that's usually when I feel the most intense types of like physical sensations coming through with breath work. So one thing would be tingling sensations. There could be like heat and cold. There's like a rise or drop in temperature in your body, and that can happen simultaneously. Like you might even feel like heat more in the upper part of your body, and then feeling cold on the lower half of your body. It could definitely vary per person, but the first thing that comes to my mind is like the tingling sensations. There's something called tetany, which is what people call a quote unquote lobster claw situation. I think it's funny when people say that, but ultimately, tetany is a form of like cramping, especially of the hands. You can experience cramping in other parts of your body. And ultimately, these physical sensations are it's an alchemical response between the amount of oxygen you're taking into your body and the carbon dioxide that wants to leave your body. And there's this alchemical response happening within that. Emotionally, it just really depends on what you're ready for. And I think it also depends on like maybe even the music or even in the guidance. A highly skilled, attuned facilitator, I think will likely bring out like the emotions in you. I think that like depending on what the journey is and how connected you are with the facilitator, likely it's going to be like very emotional. So usually it's suppressed emotions that come through, and if you are ready, open, and welcomed to feeling those feelings, I would definitely encourage you to, in a breathwork container, allow yourself to feel those emotions. And that's why we're doing the breathwork in the first place. And then even mentally, I think that people can have very busy minds during breathwork. I certainly do. I typically have a busy mind, especially in the beginning of it. And again, I'm a believer that like when you have these thoughts that are coming up during like meditation, channeling, breath work, these types of like slow movement practices, I really believe that it's coming up so that we can address it. Like there's something that we need to address here. And if we'd like to, we can definitely sit with that and see what are we being shown here. So yeah, those are definitely the things that will come up during a first time session.
Yeah, super interesting. I've got so many questions, but just to go back to the physical part, I've
Mhm.
never gotten those lobster claws, but what happens for someone who's getting that? Like, should they stop? Are they doing something wrong?
Oh, that's a great question. So, if there are any sensations that you're experiencing, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, and it feels overwhelming for you, and let's go back to the physical, like the lobster claws, the cramping, these tingling sensations. What you can do is to really extend on your exhale in a circular three-part breath. You can return to your normal breathing pattern and take a pause, take a break, and that will help alleviate those sensations. So definitely extend and exhale. And I'm thinking about those who are doing it like a virtual session where you may not necessarily be in the same room as your facilitator. And if you have your camera off, um, there could be a little bit of a missing out, because if your facilitator can't see that you are having like this cramping in a lobster claw, they may not cue for you that like, oh, as a reminder, if you're feeling these things, like this is how you can address those things. You can start to do an extend and exhale. A facilitator, again, as they are attuned, can help add in those cues so that you can address those particular sensations.
Yeah. And also, you're talking about the circular breath. Can you please explain exactly what it is?
Yeah, so the circular three-part breath is basically, depending on the facilitator, depending on your capacity, you can either breathe through the mouth or inhale through the nose. So basically, either in the mouth or through the nose, you're inhaling deep down into the belly. And then we're going to do another inhale deep into the chest here. And then we're going to exhale out of the mouth. So again, it's a three parts. So we're inhaling deep into the belly here and deep into the chest, and we're exhaling out of the mouth. So that is normally what the circular three-part breath would be.
Yeah, and for the people who aren't watching this on Spotify or YouTube, Rosie was only inhaling and exhaling through her mouth, but you're saying you can also do it just through the nose. You can choose between the two?
Yes, you can definitely inhale through the nose if that is what you have capacity for. So, inhaling through the nose, depending on the philosophy of breath work, is more of a yin approach. It's a softer approach to the three-part breath. So, inhaling through the nose into the belly, into the chest, and exhaling through the mouth. You can absolutely do that. If you are available and if you are a more experienced breather, sometimes facilitators will encourage you to breathe through the mouth. And part of the difference of doing either one would be that inhaling through the inhaling through the mouth would just be a little bit more of an aggressive approach, I would say. And then inhaling through the nose would be more of a passive approach. So it's a difference between activating like the parasympathetic response or like the sympathetic response of the nervous system.
Oh, okay, interesting. And to go more into the emotional part, when you were saying that you are there, you're talking to people, you're giving cues. Can you please explain for someone who's never been into a session? I mean, is there music? Do you talk a lot? Or are the people just breathing for, I don't know, 10 minutes nonstop and you're not talking? How is it going?
Yeah, so I love music, and I definitely believe that music really enhances and shapes the experience of breath work. So, as a fellow Pisces, I'm pretty sure you know too, Melanie, that like music is a universe, music is an experience. So, I love to curate playlists for this. It's one of my favorite parts about like facilitating and just preparing for a session and a journey.
Yeah, and your
You don't
playlists
have to
are
use
good. I
music.
mean, I did a session with you and the music was just wow. It fit so well with the breathwork session, really. I loved it.
Oh, it's so good to hear. Yeah. I've done breathwork journeys without music and with music, and I would say one of the key differences is if you were to do a breathwork journey without music, I would say that that is a whole nother level of vulnerability compared to with the music.
Mm.
I just think that there's like this level of silence without music that can be had there. But that does feel so much more vulnerable compared to actually having the music. So I definitely prefer with music. And in terms of cueing and facilitation and journeying, I like to I like to do a blend of speaking as well as being silent and allowing the person to just have their own experience without having to um, be part of that experience. And I think part of it depends on the music itself. So sometimes I don't always choose instrumental music. I do like to choose music where there are vocalists and there's lyrics and stuff like that, because sometimes like what they're saying in the song, I think could be very helpful to the journey itself. So I think in that case, I would let the song lyrics be and the singer be like the main star during that portion. So I think each song has its own rhythm of like maybe I'm going to talk here, but maybe not. And then also just being attuned to who you're breathing with, the different breathers, whether it's one person or a group, just like recognizing when is the appropriate time to speak and when is it appropriate to just be silent for them.
Yeah. And I have to say, you are a good breathwork DJ. And when you say there is healing, how does that happen for people? Do they see things? Do they remember things of the past? Is there, can someone start laughing or crying?
Yeah, so it could be anything and everything in between. So it really just depends on the journey itself. It depends on what you're available for, what you're ready for to be shown. Um, it depends on what your psychic abilities are, your psychic gifts are, your intuitive abilities are, your clear senses. So for some people, like visions are very strong for them. So um, they could just be seeing a lot of things during breath work when their eyes are closed. Or for some people, it's really about like all the physical sensations in their body, and that's how their body like speaks to them.
Mm.
Um, some people they just hear words and there's like this clear audience to them. So I think it really depends also on like what your natural intuitive psychic abilities are, and that experience likely will just come through very strongly in a breathwork experience.
Yeah. And also, I noticed that when you organize in-person sessions, like beauty is everywhere. You work with flowers, flower essences. I think I read on your website you call it botanical sessions or something like that.
Yeah, so botanical healing ceremonies, botanical breathwork ceremonies. I call it quite a few things, but ultimately, yeah, botanical. So I love in-person sessions, and that's all I want to do. It is an experience. It is a container. I'm as a facilitator here to craft a container for you. You can have any experience within that container. I just know it's going to be an experience. But yeah, in these containers that I have so much joy in crafting. It is all about the beauty and the sensuality for me. So we're using a lot of flowers, primarily roses, and that's very intentional. We're using different herbs, we're using candles and incenses, we're using crystals and flower essences. So the way in which flower essences come into play for these in-person ceremonies is you can use flower essences in quite a few different ways. One of them is likely, most people will tell you, like most practitioners will tell you, like you can just ingest it. Um, the other way that you can use it is you can use flower essences topically. So it really depends on the comfort level of the person I'm working with, if they want to just ingest it. I do both, whether they want to ingest it or not, I'm still going to be using it topically. So this is part of like the energy healing aspect for me. So I do work with my hands a lot. And so to be able to apply topically to my hands and use that as part of sending energy towards somebody on different parts of the body, that's how I typically incorporate flower essences.
Yeah. And I'd like to talk about that energy healing aspect. But first, I want to mention I mean, your name is Rosie, and you work a lot with the rose. And I'm also curious, I'm guessing you have a Cambodian name as well. Does your Cambodian name is also a flower or something around that?
Actually, no.
Oh,
So I'm the only child in my family. I have six other siblings, and I'm the only child with an Americanized name. I don't know how that happened, but um, yeah, I was named after a friend of my father's. And if we were to translate my name in Khmer, my language, Khmer, it would be Golab, which means rose, essentially. So if we were to translate my name, that's what it would be. But I was not named a Cambodian name, unfortunately.
oh, oh well. I was asking because for my husband, his Laotian name means rug because he was born in a refugee camp. And so there was a doctor there, but no hospital. And it was very much, there wasn't anything. It's like my mother-in-law gave birth on a table because that was all that there was in the doctor's hut. So she was like, "Oh, he's strong like the rock." So his Laotian name is Lipaoye or Lipaoje, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And when they moved to France, he was 3 months old and they needed to give him a French name. So they decided it was Pierre, which means rock as well. So I thought maybe there was something there, but it's fascinating. Brittany and I mentioned it in a podcast. We talked about names, but I don't think it was the name of our podcast, but we talked about how our names, first name and last names, really define who we are. And sometimes we know it from the start and sometimes we know it a bit later in life. But yeah, I find it so beautiful that you are named Rosie and you work with flowers a lot.
Thank you. I definitely think that it was meant to be for my name to be like this. I can like go on about like naming, especially like within my family. There's a significance with the middle names of me and my younger siblings. And then even my last name, I am the first of the family line to hold my last name. So I know my last name is a little bit unique. You don't usually hear people with my last name. So yeah, it's like a whole thing. And to even think about like the symbolism behind that, to think about like, so my mother wanted to name me Diana. And there's this whole story about that. Like she had a dream about an angel giving her a diamond and stuff like that. So it's so fascinating.
And Diana is still related to nature and animals and hunting. So it would still have fit, but I like Rosie. I mean, my daughter is named
Same.
Rosalie, so I do like the name. Yeah. So to go back to the energy healing aspect, that fascinates me. How do you heal with your hands? And you also say you're using the flower essences through all of that. How does that work?
Yeah, so I've taken some esoteric healing courses, but most of this, and I have to give credit to my esoteric healing teacher, Jen Wolfis, for this. She is the person who um, embodied in this lifetime. She is my teacher who has like taught me how to like really listen to my body, how to sense energy with my body, and really just to be in tuned with that. So give so much credit to Jen for that. And from those courses, through the practice of like just practicing on a daily basis, asking my guides to come through, asking my ancestors to come through, asking my lineage of healers to come through, all the healing masters, asking them to come through. I think like with the knowledge I learned from Jen and working individually, like with my spirit family, I have just like become very attuned to understanding how to like read energy on a person, like from a physical standpoint. And so it's really like, and I've also like done some studies with like Reiki healing and just like other forms of energy healing. I'm trying to think of the other one that I also studied, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but like ultimately, like there was this period of time where I just like kept studying and studying and studying, trying to understand energy healing and doing like all this practice and coming to this understanding of that. How do I say this? I am pretty sure that so when I practice energy healing and when I'm in tune and channeling with my lineage of healers, it feels somewhat like trance mediumship, without calling it that, because I can't necessarily call it that. But I do believe that it's not necessarily me who is in control of my body. So I think that like I am used as a vessel. So whenever I am in practice of really sensing energy with somebody else, I do believe that there is a spirit or a guidance that is coming through me as a vessel. And I can't really explain what that feels like. It's like this fuzzy feeling all over my body. And I'm not moving. I'm not like trying to move my body. I am being led to do those things. So that I think that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to know. I like to hear about the first times. When is the first time that you actually did energy healing, but it worked? Because I know when we're learning a new modality, we're doing all the things, but it doesn't necessarily click right away. So when was your first time when you went like, wow, it's working, something's happening?
Yeah, that's a great question because the first few times that I did it, I think that like I was forcing it a little bit. And I remember that I had a second mediumship reading. And during that reading, my guides pretty much said that I am overwatering the flower in terms of like, being in flow, trusting and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, okay, that was a little harsh, but I'll like try to understand that. And really, it was just like that I was trying to force it. And so I feel like actually after that second mediumship reading, when they told me that, that's when I stopped trying to force it. I just said, like, I just sat down and asked, come through, like use me as a vessel, show me what I know, like show me what my soul knows, and I will listen and learn. And I think that's basically what had happened. And so that was like July, uh, I don't know, like a couple years ago, a year ago, when that happened. And now I like understand what they were talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Same for me when I was starting to channel and I was forcing it too much. And as soon as I let everything go, poof, it clicked. The connection was there and it was
Yeah.
easy. So, yeah, it's really about letting go. When you say that you're working with your lineage, and I think you mentioned guides or soul family, how do they manifest for you? Do you just know, or you see them, you feel them?
Yeah, okay, so I feel like that has evolved over time. It has initially, it has really just manifested physically. Like I mentioned, it's like it feels like this fuzzy feeling around me. Like, you know how when people try to convey like the visualization of like an aura,
Mhm.
and it's like that fuzzy, colory thing around the body, like this different body around us. I feel like it's that, but it feels fuzzy. And it's kind of like a staticky kind of feeling to me. And I feel like a bunch of other things too, but that is like the first thing that comes to me. And that was initially how they've manifested for me. And actually, just recently, I feel like within the last couple of months, they are coming through very strong from like a visual standpoint. I've always had visions, but like now I'm seeing the vision, and now I feel like they are speaking to me a lot more clearly now. Um, so that has been new, and I believe that it's just part of my growth and my healing, because eventually I would like to get into mediumship.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. And I know you said that you like to work in person, but for those of us who are not in Colorado, how can we work with you?
Yeah, so I definitely do virtual journeys, and they could be like one-on-one and groups as well. So I do a lot of like virtual online stuff. I just want to do, ultimately, I just want to do more and more of everything.
Mhm.
So whether it is virtual or like in person, I would be more than happy to like work with people. And so, yeah, it would basically be over a Zoom. And um, my my journeys are usually an hour and a half or longer. So it is a little bit of a commitment, but that is partially my choice of being a more conscious facilitator with the breathwork journeys. And then I do have an offering where it's 60 minutes, and that is more of uh, teaching somebody like different breathing techniques, helping somebody prepare for a breathwork journey if they've never been introduced to it, if they're like not sure if this is how they want to move forward. Because again, like breathwork journeys can be very intense, and sometimes you don't know if you're like going to be vulnerable enough for it. So the 60-minute version is really for those who want the introduction, and want to be prepared for it before they commit to like a really big thing as well.
Yeah, and also for the 90 minutes one, I'm guessing that you have an introduction with the person, you're asking questions, and also a conclusion. So it's not like 90 minutes nonstop, here we go.
Yes, exactly. So the breathwork journeys I facilitate are at least 45 minutes, 45 to 60 minutes usually. And then within that 90-minute container, there is an introduction. There is just speaking about like where you're at right now and how the journey can help with you. And then there's also like the unwinding. There is the integration aspect of it as well at the end of the journey.
Yeah. And I know that you personally, you've been through trauma, and I'm guessing that you must have a lot of people who have gone through those kind of things who are coming to you, because I feel like people feel drawn to us from what we've experienced. So how does it work if someone come to you and say, look, I've gone through this or that trauma and I would like to heal gently? How do you go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that like first, um, no one is ever required to share their like very specific experiences with me. It's up to you if you want to talk about those things. I am always available and open to like hearing those things, but I don't require somebody to give me the details of their experiences because that could sometimes re-traumatize a person.
Mhm.
Um, and I I think that like if somebody wants a more gentle approach, or maybe like the idea of like an intensive breathwork journey sounds too much for them, too overwhelming for them, it's always good to know. And that's something that I always ask, like, what do you think that you are prepared for? Like something more intense, or are we looking at more of a gentle approach? And from there, I can definitely make recommendations. It doesn't necessarily, in the space of healing, it's not about like, oh, you need to work with me for you to heal. It's more about like, how can I help you heal? And it doesn't matter if you're working with me or not. Our jobs as healers is to help point somebody in the right direction. And
Mhm.
so I think that like having an open conversation with someone, and understanding what their needs are, that can help me tailor the experience, and that can help me point them in the right direction if I'm not the fit for them. And I would say from having a more gentle approach, one thing I found is definitely flower essences. I can always make recommendations to flower essences. And that like you kind of just do on your own time. You're really just ingesting the flower essences at your own time. And you're working with the flower essences individually. And then I think that like in terms of what else somebody can do that could be a more gentle approach, I would say that just recognizing that like having a conversation with someone can be so helpful, and especially speaking to someone who can hold space for you. Not everybody is qualified to hold space for you, and I don't mean that from like working with a spiritual service professional. I also mean like your friends and your family. Not everyone in your support system is qualified to hold the space for you that you need to help you heal. And I think that keeping that in mind will hopefully help somebody understand that, like, yeah, I can share my experiences and tell my story to anybody in this world, but is that person qualified and equipped to help me move through that? And I think that that is an important thing to just keep in mind in terms of like, where do I start?
Mhm.
And what am I ready for?
Yeah, exactly. We need to quote unquote shop our healers and just see do I feel aligned with this
Yeah.
person? Does it resonate for me? It's super important. Yeah, yeah. And I
Mhm.
like that you talked about auras before, because since the beginning of this interview, I'm just looking at you and your aura is crazy, crazy shiny. You're on
Is there a
fire.
certain color?
It's white.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh, she's an angel. Well, Rosie, is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners?
I would just say one thing I would like to share is just to remind people that um, there's no right or wrong way for you to do what you need to do in this lifetime. The only timeline that matters is yours. And your timeline is what you're ready for. And so if you're not ready to like do that thing that you know you need to do, but you're just not ready for it, that's okay too. Don't try to compare your timeline to other people. Don't try to compare your timeline to things like astrology. And I know I use astrology all the time, and I have like my favorite astrologers that I love. And at the same time, like it just because something is happening collectively, astrologically, and you don't feel aligned with that doesn't mean that you're too slow or you're not doing it right or you're doing it wrong. It just means that like you're at where you're supposed to be at. And that is one thing that I always just try to remind people, that like you're not doing it wrong. You're just on your own timeline.
Thank you, Rosie, for coming on the Tea with Intuitives podcast. To get in touch with Rosie, you can check out the show notes for all the links. And now to some news from Maryland. I am offering once again my Focus 2024 tarot reading. And that is a tarot reading where we look at what might be coming up for you in 2024 in terms of theme, lesson, relationships, work, etc. And that's a pretty popular offering, and I am pre-recording this podcast. So honestly, at the time you are hearing this, I cannot guarantee there are still spots left. So if you are interested, go and check that out quickly. I will leave the link in the show notes. And if you don't want to miss any of my special offerings that have limited spots and or are for a limited time, the best way is to subscribe to my newsletter, where you actually get dibs before I talk about my readings or classes on social media, and you also get the biggest promos there. And by the way, some offerings I only offer through my newsletter, so it's really worth it to subscribe. Plus, you get a free collective card reading every 15th of the month. Okay, so this is it for me today. Thank you for listening to the Tea with Intuitives podcast. If you have a question, you can send it at teawithintuitives@gmail.com or via Instagram or YouTube. And I know I'm saying this every time, but it really does make a difference. Your rating, reviews help the podcast grow and be seen by more fellow old souls, and that helps us build a wonderful community. If you are on Spotify, you can participate in our polls and share your stories there. If you are on Apple Podcasts, please do give us a review and share it with us so we can give you a shout out, especially if you are not Canadian, because I can only see Canadian reviews. And if you're on YouTube, comment and give us a thumbs up. Okay, thanks again, everyone. Have a beautiful week. Bye.